Good evening. It's Monday evening, February 4th, 2013 at 6 p.m. It's time for our regular City Council meeting. And I'll call the meeting to order. And Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Gastineau?
Here.
Councilmember Shalong? Here. Councilmember Murray? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Holly?
Here.
And Mayor Enya.
I'm here. And would you please stand? And Mayor Pro Tem Holly will lead us in the pledge.
Sure.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have come out of closed session, and I'll ask our Assistant City Attorney, Martha Rice, did we have anything to report out of closed session?
No actions to report out of closed session.
Thank you. Under acknowledgements, we have none tonight. Consent calendar, items 1 through 4. Is there a motion for?
I move to approve items 1 through 4 on the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any comment on items 1 through 4 on the consent calendar? Seeing none, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murray?
Yes.
Councilmember Gastineau?
Yes.
Councilmember Shalong?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Holly?
Yes.
And Mayor Enya.
Yes. Reports and presentations, we have none tonight. Communications with public comment period. This is the time any member of the audience is invited to address the City Council on any matter that's within the jurisdiction of the City of Crescent City. Comments of public interest or on matters appearing on the agenda will be accepted. Note, however, that the Council is not able to undertake extended discussion or act on non-agendized items. Such items can be referred to staff for appropriate action, which may include placement on a future agenda. Any comments that are not made at the microphone or out of order will not be part of the public record. And after receiving recognition from the Mayor, please state your name and whether you're a city or county resident for our record. And the comment is limited to 3 minutes. Is there any public comment? Yes.
At the last City Council,
State your name, please.
My name's Richard Miles. I'm a resident of the city. At the last City Council meeting, I spoke against something. And because of an event over this weekend, I'd like to bring something to your attention. Mr. Wakefield can tell you that throughout the history of the city's fire department, there have been a number of arson fires. I became aware of the rumor mill today that a fire that occurred this weekend might have been caused by an arsonist. Hopefully that's not true. But I think the city should rethink the ordinance about city fires. If an arson, and law enforcement, and that means the state fire marshal, the sheriff's department, or the police department, in their investigation, proves that an arson has occurred within the city limits, that the person that caused that fire, not the property owner, be charged recovery costs for the city and recover costs for the property owner. A number of years ago, I worked at the prison. They are prisoners now serving at Pelican Bay and serving all over the state of California that are required to pay restitution. I think the city should think about that. If the city brings charges to the DA and the arson is convicted in Del Norte County, that some provisions in an ordinance makes it possible for the city and the property owner to recover the costs. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure the fire was not caused by arson.
Any other,
Can I ask you a question? Why was the police chief, members of the sheriff's department, and the state fire people at that location?
thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Our fire fees, by the way, the original ones would have covered arson. That's not caused by the homeowner, that's arson, so they wouldn't have been charged for it anyway. But that's not in our fees, on our new fee scale.
But if I may,
Yes.
I was a probation officer at one time, and restitution can be considered, I think, regardless of whether or not we have it in an ordinance, if we've lost money fighting something done by an arson. So it's a matter of contacting the district attorney or the probation office and getting us included as someone entitled to restitution.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
I
We'll move-
think
Thank
the
you.
police chief is coming.
Yes, Chief?
Thank you. Under the criminal penal code, we can ask for restitution regardless of the criminal. Whenever there's expense of our equipment being used, damage to our property, damage to our uniforms, I always ask for restitution, whether it's be a probe from one of the electric control devices that we use, or damage to a patrol car. But regardless, everything goes through the DA's office for restitution.
Do you ever get it?
The percentage is
You
not...
don't have to answer
The
that.
percentage is not as high as I would like it to be. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 5, a public hearing. This is to conduct a public hearing to adopt our mid-year budget update for the fiscal year 2012-2013 and take action as necessary. Mr. Palazzo?
Yeah, Mayor Nia, members of the council, good evening. I'd like to introduce Ken McDonald, our finance director, to do...
Very nice to meet you, Ken McDonald.
What's that?
Said you want to introduce him to us. I says, very nice to meet him.
For those that don't know
I'm lightening the mood. We're about to talk about the budget.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor.
Do we have to wait for the monitor up above? Okay. Oh, there we go. It's coming. Okay, we've started our mid-year budget review. We went through and analyzed everything. And just a quick overview of everything that we've got on there.
Right click.
Well, I tried the right and the left.
You actually have to hit next slide. That's why I thought it was easier for you to use the...
Keyboard, I'll do that. Yeah, it'll be a lot easier because I can just hit the space bar. We'll start off with the Housing Authority. That one, we're pretty much holding the line on what we started with. We're currently monitoring all federal legislative actions, the sequestration and all those types of things to make sure any effect they're going to have. We're maintaining our administrative reserve balance. Our balance in the Housing Authority is two components, what we've called in the next program restricted reserve, which we call the Housing Authority Payment HAP reserve. So there's two components. We're maintaining our administrative reserve, and we're working with HUD to access reserve balances that they're holding, because they've had a process over the last year or two where the program reserves that we have, they've been taking those back, and so we have to monitor them on a regular basis and ask for them. So rather than them sitting in our bank account, they sit with HUD. And so we've been on a regular basis monitoring that, and so we should be able to deal with those declining balances that we're seeing based on that action.
Would you like us to answer or ask questions per category, or wait till you're done?
I can kind of handle it. We've got it set up topically where we're going over the four of the major funds, the housing, general, sewer, and water. Anything that I can't answer, I've got assistants here, so.
That's
Okay.
fine.
So my question was, if the 5% sequestration from the federal government happens, how much is 5% of the budget?
I think we did some analysis of that, and it's going to affect prior year funding levels. We won't know anything until March. There is some feedback that we've got from some lobbying agencies that work with them that give us direct information that we may not see that until the end of the calendar year. So we pretty much held to our original estimates because as of right now it looks like they'll hold, but we won't find out any of this stuff until March when it comes out, and it's really at the federal government's hands as to where they really go. So we're looking at it. If we do have some adjustments to it, obviously it'll tap into those reserves that we've maintained for
I just
that.
wanted to make sure the 5% would not equal more than what's in the reserve.
I don't think that has been our estimate.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. The next one we'll move into is the general fund. That one we've had some improvement from our initial proposed deficit to what we have as a proposed surplus now. It's not anything that I would bank on. It's relying on some one-time expenditures that I have in the next slide kind of referred to, the RDA dissolution housing money that we've got. We've estimated $106,000, but as of today we haven't received that money, so it's really unknown how much that will actually turn out to be.
Well, that money will be coming from the county, correct?
Well, really they're cutting the check, but it's coming from the state. So I've been in some communication with the auditor controller.
Isn't that $106,000 a percentage of the overall $900-some thousand that we've already given to the county?
Yeah, what we've had is in our past cash flow, we've looked at the Crescent City's percentage fee is just a little over 10%, and so that's what we used as that amount. There's some scuttle and comments from some other counties and from our county here that there's another portion that is subtracted from that, but whether that will affect the net amount we get, I'm just going to have to wait to see how that's going to pan out.
Well, how, shouldn't they have a time requirement? And, I mean, we've already provided the money to the county, so.
Yeah, I've been trying to look up in the codes if it specifically calls for that, and I haven't seen it. I've heard reference to it was supposed to be made by the deadline for tax payments of, I think, somewhere towards the end of January. We received our first tax payment, but we didn't receive this one-time fund. So I have a feeling we should be seeing something like that towards the end of this month. I know they can't hold it too long.
We can call the county tomorrow and find out the status of that, and we'll let the council know.
Great.
And we're still having our oversight meeting next Wednesday, the 13th?
That is correct.
Okay. So if you...
We have some updates to that we'll give you later on.
So if you want to see how it operates, you're welcome to join us. 1 o'clock.
Bring plenty of coffee. What we did is we've come up with some ideas for utilizing this one-time revenue. One was funding the abatement and cleanup program, which we figured would be seed money. It's kind of a, not really a restricted, but a committed balance that the council would be, and it's still considered technically part of the general fund, but we were going to create a new fund for that, and it's in your budget there. The idea that that seed money will get started as those projects go in and the abatements come back in, it will start paying for itself. So we're not anticipating additional funding going in there, but that is, you know, an option that we could look at. If we've got enough projects going, have used up that $50,000, we want to get some more, we may have to put in some more seed money until that revolving revenue source kind of comes back in. The next item that we have down with the police and fire equipment replacement, we've been taking care of maintenance on all the equipment, but we haven't been planning for replacement of specifically the public safety equipment. We don't have a method of funding that, so we've put in a contribution method where we would contribute a certain amount and it would be set aside in a replacement fund. What it amounts to is about half of either a new command vehicle or a new patrol vehicle, with the theory being that if we can wait until July, we'd have this same type of funding source commitment in the next year's budget, which would then give us, you know, technically this year will give us 50% of the cost for a new unit.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
I know that the council created a policy a few years back to create the fund that would start replacing equipment, and I'm just curious why the fire and police weren't a part of that policy.
You know, I'm not, what we've had going is we've had a public works component that factors in a maintenance portion and a replacement portion, but that wasn't really factored in for any public safety. So the police and fire units, if they needed to be replaced, had to be pretty much just paid. The last couple units that we've gotten were purchased from grants, so we haven't had to outlay any money, at least in the last 5 years, other than just maintaining our fleet.
And when you say 45,000 will be 50% of the expense of one vehicle,
That's our rough estimate.
why is that so expensive? Does that include all of the technology inside of it as well?
I
If
think
it
it
were a
was
police car?
half of a fire command vehicle. Steve's unit has been getting a few miles on there, so we wanted to start planning for that. I think longer term, another engine that's been in the capital equipment plan that we have.
I may be corrected by Mr. Weir on this, you know, that out of his department's been putting together the replacement vehicles, but I think that's half for a fire vehicle, but it probably covers the cost of a police vehicle.
Not all the, you know, like, not all the, what I think we're assuming is that when we get, say, a fire vehicle, we're gonna take out of the command vehicle that we have now to put in. So I think it's more of the base.
So we're not talking about just like a Chevy Tahoe that he drives around. We're talking about a full medical fire truck for 90,000?
Well,
No, this is police and fire,
let
so
me-
it's about.
Let me finish my statement here. Yeah, I don't want to really get into the details of which vehicle we're going to buy. I mean, that.
I know, but I'm curious why one vehicle costs $90,000.
That's
my
half of two
question.
vehicles, one
Okay,
police, one
let
fire.
me answer that. The point of this funding is to get a fund started so we can, do our vehicle replacements here in the future. And we'll come back to the council through the budget process and explain exactly what the needs are and the priorities are. The idea of setting aside the $45,000 was to get the fund started so we have the money available. There's a lot of ways that we can use that money, and looking at the needs, whether it's a replacement of the fire vehicle or an individual police car, and I can get those numbers at a later date. Again, the idea was to get a fund in place so we can have money.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Just when you say 45,000 is 50% of a cost, sounds to me like you've already put the numbers together.
We do have some
Very
numbers.
rough.
And actually, it's in the 5-year capital improvement program. I can probably, go through here and pull out, some numbers. But, at this point, the idea was to get the dollars into an account so we can start doing these replacements.
So we can see, it's a draft. And
Yeah, if you look at the overall summary on page 2 of the budget, you'll see 27,500 was the fire vehicle replacement contribution and 17,500. That's, half of the estimate of the base vehicle, not all the equipment to outfit it. So that's not going to have a vehicle that an officer can jump in and go. It's going to be, just the basic unit and then go from there.
In the capital improvement plan that we put together for the council that was reviewed in October, in 2014 budget year, we said police department acquisition for vehicles and the fire department acquisition for vehicles. The police department was $20,000 on an annual basis, and kind of goes up in increments of $500 every year after that. And the fire department was $55,000, and then the future years additional money. And I think the point was at this one-time revenue gives us an ability to seed a program so we can start looking at the future, and then we'll bring back the specifics to the council with exactly what vehicle is needed and why.
Yeah, and basically what we're doing here is these 4 bulleted items are really just the big major changes from the original budget that was last June to now. When we started out, the new police officer and the finance analyst position, they had a lot longer time of being hired and on the books than what we know at right now. So we've just refined those, which reduced the operating costs by a little bit amount based on those. So it's really just reflecting the biggest changes that are really different from June to now.
So on this 106,000 is, are these, is this expense going to be brought back to the council for us to approve? Or are you asking for approval now on these two concepts?
So this is as a mid-year budget review, this is what we would, amend, I guess would be the right terminology, the budget, to include this revenue that we anticipate, coming in, and then once we receive that revenue, this is where that revenue would go.
Yeah, I mean, in the budget, I have 3 new funds proposed for these two items. The abatement fund, just for simplicity's sake, Fund 251, because Department 251 is code enforcement, and then came up with a 930 for fire vehicle and a 940 fund. So it really is creating new funds, but it's all within the council's purview. If at a later date we want to dissolve those and transfer that money back, there's no restrictions on it. We're really just, kind of like you said, setting up a policy and a trend that's written here in the budget. It's not a formal policy that's written, but it's kind of a policy that's going to be passed in the budget.
Right, and I agree with the concept. It's just that the whole council, I think, should agree with how that extra revenue is going to be expended.
Right, and that's kind of why we have it in here
Maybe one person thinks that a
too.
police officer should be funded.
I'm still there.
And that's why this is before the council. This is our staff recommendation. I would caution the council on funding positions with one-time revenue.
Yeah.
And that's why we went with
I
the...
was just using that as an
Yeah.
example.
Thank you.
But with the one-time revenue, coming in, we do have an opportunity, to help put in place and look at some of our strategic issues that we've discussed, and look at our capital improvement, plan going into the future on what we need to focus on.
Thanks.
Sure. And from that, we'll go into our enterprise funds.
I'm sorry, can
Yeah.
we go back just for a second?
Sure.
Please. The last one having to do with position vacancies, we're just simply saying we're going to fill those positions. Weren't those positions already budgeted for half a year?
Yeah, I can't remember what I started the year with. It could have been like 3/4 of a year for those positions. They obviously haven't been filled yet, so for me to take it to leave it at 3/4, I know I'm not going to spend that. I moved them back down.
Oh, I see.
So like, half a year, or if the position isn't going to start until April 1st, then 1/4 of a year.
So you made those adjustments there. but-
Yeah.
And,
but-
if I can, jump in there, part of the reason for highlighting that is to make you aware, we are really working on one-time revenues with, this general fund. The positions are real important because those are ongoing costs, and we, next year when we come back to adopt the 2014 budget, 2013-14 budget, these positions are going to be added to, because we're going to hire a police officer, we're going to, hire a finance analyst, and they're only budgeted for half a year. In this budget year, next year, they're going to be another half a year. So, we're adding to our budget. And so, I don't want the council or the community to be surprised when we come back and we're doing other adjustments in the 13-14 budget, to, get the staffing that we need to move forward. So
But
we're
we
still...
already approved the finance position.
We did.
Right.
But we budgeted for half a time, so I'm just saying, the way these numbers are shown in the general fund budget, and it's on to the previous slide, we're doing really well, we're holding the line, but there are things coming up into the future that we need to be very cautious about on how we do our budgeting and our funding, because we're not out of the woods, basically. We're still, there's still, a budget deficit that we're dealing with.
So just for clarity then, we're still looking forward to hiring a finance analyst
Yes.
and a police officer?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure those weren't off the table. They're
They're
still
not.
in there.
Well, and before you move on, there's some other things that we should point out for the public. For our fund balance for the general fund, our taxes, our sales tax have increased by a little over 2%, but our TOT has gone down by 3.5% from what was projected. So that makes a difference. And I was curious what your thinking was behind saying that the new hotel could make up the difference, because it adds rooms.
Well, I think the theory would be is, if it's stealing customers, or we get, say, 100 customers that come in here, and those 100 customers are spread out to different motels, having a new motel right on the highway, I'm thinking if our typical average would be 100 customers, maybe we're going to get 105, so we should get some new hotel guests and customers in there. I'm hoping it doesn't just distribute out and allocate it out to everybody, but we'll definitely see more revenue during the summer months when everything gets booked up by having more available when everybody's no vacant. That's just going to be an increase. The key is going to be that they can operate year-round and continue to operate with a profit.
And adding to that, and when you get a new hotel in town, a motel in town, it's very attractive, to your customers driving through, and they're probably more apt to stop there. When you have something new, a lot of times the rates are a little bit higher than, an older motel on the street there. So with people staying there, the occupancy typically is higher than the other hotels, thus your occupancy is higher. The rates are higher, your TOT, comes in higher. So the theory is that, hopefully that will help increase our TOT revenue.
Okay.
We're also seeing more domestic tourism increases than we have in other areas. From looking at, resources I have from Las Vegas, they see a lot more domestic travel than people are going out of town. So I think when the economy's harder, people maybe are staying more local, because we haven't seen the severe decrease even in our TOT over the last 4 or 5 years that a lot of other areas have over the longer term.
So, and then also, part of the addition to the expenses is the building inspector?
And that one, we analyzed looking at hiring a building inspector as to contracting with the county for it. The theory being is that it should cost us relatively the same expense. So basing it off of the revenue, what the expense will be, we're thinking it's not going to be very much change, but we should be able to deliver better service to the...
I think the council's in full agreement. When are we going to go out to advertise for that position?
Immediately.
Good.
So do we need to vote on that?
I think it's part of the budget.
Part of the budget, okay.
Go ahead, Mr. McDowell.
Okay. Back into the enterprise fund. What we're seeing by the operations and maintenance, that's the O&M, and the capital improvement program implementations that we're doing, our current rate structure isn't enough to ensure us having a balanced budget. Now a lot of the reasons for that is additional pre-treatment costs and expenses that we have to incur. The NPDES is National Point. It's the regulatory agency that controls what goes out of our plant. And then OSHA for occupational safety and health. We're getting a better handle on operating this new plant that we've had now for a couple years, whereas when we started out in the beginning with our rate study, which was 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was 4 years ago, we really were taking industry standard pro formas for how that plant would cost us to operate. And it's really hard to know what those costs are until you actually get out there. We've been doing a lot of preventative maintenance, which I think should give us better long-term operational efficiencies, and just the projects that we're doing out there that should improve it overall.
I have some things. Does anybody else want to talk?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we're talking about sewer fund, right?
Well, let me move into the next one, because that one, we'll start with sewer first.
No, it is.
This was
Okay.
kind of an overview for both.
Okay.
But go ahead, we'll start right into it if you have.
Yeah, okay, so I think the council should discuss a policy on counting on revenue for a project that hasn't come to fruition. Because when I discussed this fund with our city manager today, I was very surprised to see how much of a deficit we're in. When we had, the Wildan study, and the financial models that we've used, and all of a sudden, we're at $800,000 in the hole. And that, when we approved the budget in the beginning of the year, we approved a $56,000 deficit. It seems unfathomable to me for us to be this far in the hole. So I understand there's, when you're operating a new plant, there's going to be expenses that you can't foresee. I also understand that the operations of the plant have become much more efficient, which is a good thing. You know, and I know a lot of that's thanks to Tom and his management skills. But the fact that we, you know, are in this predicament, I think is something we need to address immediately. And I think that we counted on $450,000 of hookup fees for an apartment building that has not been built yet. And I think that's a huge mistake for us. And I think we should discuss, you know, is that normal to put that much revenue in your budget and count on it when you're not sure it's going to happen?
Well, when the Wildan study was done, I think they gave us a growth factor of like 2 or 3%.
It was 11%, wasn't it?
Well, even that, it's going to be,
The
you
overall
know,
was 11?
pretty low. The year before, we got $730,000 in connection fees. It's very hard. What we really need is probably a $50,000, $100,000, something a lot smaller on an annual basis, and just understand that some years we're going to go way over that, and other years we're not. That way, we leveled that out. But what happened, we didn't budget for it, but we got a huge, tremendous amount and kind of assumed that that same level of connection would come around. It hasn't materialized, and now we've made it a lot more conservative, that it appears that the conservative numbers we drop will be exceeded with a couple other connections that came in. But adding that, it's kind of like counting your chickens before they hatch.
Right. I agree with the concept of budgeting for, you know, taking an average over a number of years of connection fees and budgeting for that, knowing it's going to go up or down by 20% maybe. But to budget in a $500,000 project that didn't come into fruition, I'm uncomfortable with.
And we thought it was going to be, and actually until I saw this, I didn't know that it wasn't going through. So we do need to be cautious on how we project our income. But the other way we can do that is that I believe these are going to be quarterly reports, so that we'll have a better handle on where we are
You know,
every 3 months.
Yeah, and the
Is
quarterly
that what you-
report is
yeah.
the, what you received at the consent calendar is the general ledger, kind of give you the quarterly update on where we're at. And we'll be doing that quarterly for the council. The budget itself, you know, as, you know, adopting the budget, mid-year budget, definitely that needs to occur as things, you know, shift and move throughout the year. We'll be reporting any significant changes to the council, and that's why this is, you know, before you tonight. Yeah, it was an error on staff's part here to include that. You know, I think the best information we had at the budget time was that the complex was going to happen. Now we know more. You know, we have better information. We're, you know, letting you know that we don't believe it's going to happen. We can still, you know, have a fund balance at the end of the year without this, but does, you know, put a lot more strain on this budget.
So we're not going to count it until the actual project gets closer to starting.
We're going to need to, that is correct, and I think, you know, we're going to have a conversation, you know, with staff. You know, Ken, Eric, we'll sit down and we'll kind of decide how we want to handle this in the future. Is it, you know, a projection of, you know, 50,000 a year with connections? Because we will get some connections. We just need to be a lot more conservative with how we, you know, project this revenue coming in.
Yeah, because the year before we started with a 600,000 estimate. It ended up being a 730,000, so it was 130,000 higher.
Yeah.
But, you know, if the money's already there, it's probably safe in overestimating those, but at the beginning of the year, we probably need to take a much more conservative, lower number.
And, yeah, we need to be
And I
more
know that we're
conservative.
going to do a rate study.
Yes.
Because the council's already, I think, approved that. But I'd like to kind of see, so my confusion, I mean, you know, a big chunk of that deficit is that projected revenue that's not coming in. But there's still another $400,000 that we're down. So I'd kind of like to see, like, here's a Wildan study and then here's construction, and then operating expenses is going up, and then here we are today. How did we go like this, you know?
I think the Wildan study's estimate of expenses were a lot lower than what we're at now, too.
Yeah, and we're gonna do the analysis, you know, to get the facts and the actual numbers and bring that back to the council. I don't wanna, you know, kind of project on what's out there. You know, we need to do that analysis, and we're working on getting that completed to bring to the council.
Yeah, in the Wildan study, too, we had a rate increase that we postponed 1 year. Now, in retrospect, it probably would have been good to put that in place.
Well, and, you know, we've been trying to lightly move, you know, forward and not affect the ratepayers as much. You know, that was our commitment to, you know, to not affect the ratepayers as much as we thought we had to in the beginning.
And it just brings our estimates a lot closer, and, you know, we're seeing now when something changes, it has a much more serious and major impact than we thought of before.
I guess all I would say is, if there's that much of a reduction in revenues, do we need to be doing something on the expense side to bring us a little closer? You know, we got half a year left, and we have an $808,000 deficit. That means $400,000 is still out there.
Yeah, I can have Mr. Ware or Mr. Romsberg address that if you like. At this point, you know, they're operating pretty, I think, pretty efficiently, but, you know, some of the resources, you know, staffing and all that, it's, you know, we're at the minimum. So, and those are things that we're addressing, and we need to bring back to the council on how do we, you know, move this business forward, you know, to maintain it in the same state as it was when it opened up for that first day.
You know, is my take on it is that that apartment complex is going to happen. There's 2 of them there. Now, they've chosen not to do it at this time, right now, but that's going to come. So the $400,000 one deficit does not surprise me.
It's timing.
It's timing.
It's timing.
I mean, our fees for sewer are high, and people aren't hooking up, and we knew that when we did that. And it doesn't surprise me about the $400,000. It's very difficult to make that up without additional revenue. And
Well, I agree with you, but we talked about, you know, there should be a business plan. We need to have a business plan. This should be run like a business. And one of the things that I brought forward that we moved forward on was creating the financing program for those that wanted to hook up and couldn't afford it. So, you know, are we marketing that? Are we, you know, are we working on our lab? What are we doing? We need to be more proactive.
And some of them too, like the MBR project, that one we have to do based on the regulator's request. So some of them we can't delay.
And you know, there's a lot, I think, that's being done, and I mean, Eric can maybe take a few minutes to...
Well, he's coming up. I'll use Kelly's segue to say the good news is that we have land in the city limits and we have hookups. So if anybody wants to build an apartment complex, come on down.
or business.
So yes, to address council members Hawley's comment about, you know, that we're halfway through this year, and so theoretically there should be, you know, $400,000 that maybe we have, you know, something that we can do about it at this time. You know, really that's not the case, because it's not about an elective project that we're choosing to do or choosing not to do. You know, within this budget that was adopted, there's a structural deficit between our operations and maintenance and our capital improvements that we need to do. So we had our MBR project that we completed. We had to do that. That was an administrative project. That was a compliance project that was required by the state. That project's been completed. That project in this year's budget was $100,000 more than what we expected. But again, it's about the timing of things. So last year we budgeted $100,000 for the tanks. Those tanks didn't actually come on site until August of this year. So those costs were accrued this year. So the project really isn't $100,000 over budget. It's just this year's budget is $100,000 more. Last year's was $100,000 less. So, you know, there's different things like that that are coming into play with this $800,000. But more importantly, you know, the sewer fund just taking aside projects, is $680,000 in the deficit. You know, those are our operational components. We right now we're operating at a minimum level of preventative maintenance. And you know, that's a key component to the operation and the running of a utility is you have to have a preventive maintenance program that is going to keep up the asset that we have. This community has invested over $40 million into this treatment plant. It's our responsibility to upkeep this treatment plant, to have the personnel that we need, to have the rate structures and the revenues that are going to be able to upkeep this plant, or else we're just delaying the cost, and they're going to be tremendously more. It's just like, you know, if you're the owner of a house, preventive maintenance is going to save you money in the long run. And so it's important that we have those rates to do that.
Eric, you're preaching to the choir. I think the council agrees and made it very clear and very strong policy that we wanted to budget maintenance for this plant. And we never wanted our plant to get into the kind of condition it was in 10 years ago, prior to this. So, but with that being said, we had a rate study done, we had a financial model, we had the rate structure put into place to support that, and now we're way out in left field. So that's why we're questioning it.
Exactly, and the rate study was done before the plant was completed. Now we have 1 year of operation underneath our belt. We understand what it takes to actually operate this plant, both from a staffing level side and also from a maintenance side. So we're proactive on that. We're getting a better grasp of what our capital improvements are from this day forward into the future, and we need to incorporate those as well. So the projects that are coming up in the future will also be incorporated into this rate analysis. Certain things have changed as far as the way that we budget things, as far as admin costs and how those are distributed from when that rate model was done. So that's where it's going to be vital that we do this analysis in the future, now that we have a lot more known about our current plant that we have, so that we can address these things. Because it's, you know, it's our obligation, and I think the council and staff were on the same page, and now we need to just move forward with that and get our rates so that they can allow us to do these preventive maintenance procedures and to look forward towards the project, so we don't have another $42 million treatment plant project in the future. You know, it's always going to be a living project, but if we take it one step at a time and we don't let things get run down, it's where the city and this community in general are going to be a lot better off.
I agree.
Well, that kind of covers most of the bullets on this one. We can get into the water fund. This one, we've really changed this from some projects that we planned in the beginning of the year that we're pretty confident that we won't be able to get to this year. So that's the majority of the reductions that are down there. So we've just taken this mid-year opportunity to really hone into exactly what we think we can do and where we're at from there. And we're the same thing for the sewer plan. We want to use a rate study to analyze our expenses and our rate revenues to really see where that's at.
Yeah, Ken, just while we're here, can you tell us when the last rate increase was for the water?
I think it was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's been a real long time. I've yet to find anybody that has a basic rate of 500 units as a basic minimum bill that no one in the state, and I'd be fearful of asking anybody south of Central California, because they pay imported water rates from Colorado River and some other sources. So we still have very cheap, affordable, and probably the cleanest water in the state. But we've been able to hold that down now with upgrading the tank, painting, and doing a lot of the infrastructure improvements that we need. Our rates don't quite address that from a long-term perspective.
You know, I will say, when we're talking about the water system, I had the pleasure of accompanying Mr. Weir and Mr. Palazzo taking a look at the whole system. And what I found most alarming was the elevated tank not being seismically retrofit. The idea that that tank could go down and water would not be available to all of Crescent City, as I understand it. And that I think is, you know, as they say, the weakest link. I think that's one that we're going to need to address, if for no other reason, for public safety.
That's the Washington Boulevard tank?
No.
This is the Wonder Stump.
Yeah, the one that's outside of town.
Oh, the Wonder Stump, okay.
Yeah.
And
Eric can address some of the specifics, but I know that the cost to seismically upgrade that tank will be a significant dollar amount less than if we had to put in emergency pumps to get pressure, and basically that elevated tank gives the system pressure in order to get that thing running. But
And actually, that, I'm going to chime in before it, steps up. Yeah, that's a real prime example of, doing a capital improvement program and looking at future costs. The tank was built in 1954, I believe, and, starting to put, set aside dollars to either replacement or upgrade, in the future is real important with everything that, we do here, as a city. So, if you want to add to that.
Does a prison get water from that tank?
Indirectly, yes. That the whole system rides on that tank, so to
Right.
speak. That the pressure that is created all across the system, in town and out of the prison, is created by the water getting pumped up to that elevated tank, and then gravity flows from there. But yes, that is a vital component of the water system, and I just want to let the council know that we're going to move forward with hiring a tank inspection company to come in. They're going to evaluate all of our tanks so that we have a better handle on what the actual costs are going to be for that seismic retrofit, and you will see that project in front of you for the 13-14 budget.
Thank you.
And the most vital part is our proposed or planned future actions. For all funds, we want to maintain adequate staffing levels and be able to address all the things that are out there. Our philosophy in the general fund, we're still just trying to hold the line so we can kind of see what's going to happen with revenues. But the biggest weakness in the general fund is our need for future infrastructure and facilities. With basically just covering our operational costs, it doesn't plan for any future needs for any buildings and facilities that the general fund serves. The enterprise funds, we just talked about, the rate model to address the structural deficit and the capital improvements programs that are needed, and just continue to implement the processes to optimize our operating efficiencies.
A couple of things that, I'm just kind of going through this and want to make sure that we do highlight. Ken, if you could talk about maybe the internal service funds a little bit, and what we have in there, for this mid-year is the City Hall upgrade remodel, that we've discussed. There's a couple other things in there that we wanted to address too.
Well, one that's good news is our insurance fund that we have. We used to be with SCORE, Small Cities Organized Risk Effort, and we have a large balance with them that is pending future years when they close out those years, which goes back as far as 7, I think, to 10 years. They hold reserves to deal with any claims that they have on file, or what they call incurred but not reported, INBR. So as they go through in future years, we have to annually request those funds, but if they close those out, anything above that incurred and not reported, we can request those back, and the board has been giving us, I think, 50% of those available funds. And this is based on, they have actuarials that come out and estimate which each city's reserve balance can be. So they're still being incredibly prudent. And there's a lot of credence in knowing that those dividends are going to continue to come in. In July and June, we didn't know that those were going to come in, so we didn't budget for those. They came in at about $64,000. So what that did is it reduced the insurance costs for the entire city. So as those costs were allocated out, all the different funds saw an improvement in their insurance costs of that internal service fund. So I anticipate that's going to continue to happen, but I'll probably continue to recommend that we don't budget for those dividends so that when they do come in, it won't be a worst case scenario, it'll always be a better case scenario. That's the biggest improvement. What Gene was talking about with the City Hall remodeling, if we have somebody that comes in that is disabled, we have no ability to really meet with them properly, so we're looking at rearranging and making one entrance lobby for cashiering and dealing with the city, and then also having a meeting room on the first floor, which would make it handicap accessible. We've proposed using some program income to contribute to that project, but that's going to require us to get Housing and Community Development, HCD, which is a state agency, to approve use of our program income funds for that idea. So we've got it on this year's budget, but it could very well continue into next year. But we're looking to try and do the portion that that's paid for by the building fund to do some remodeling and improvements there, and that's included in this one. So there's some increases from the beginning of the year to now.
Can we just do something as simple as put the Public Works Director's office up where the conference room is and make the Public Works office a conference room on the first floor?
We're looking at all that. You know, a lot of it is the efficiencies of the two doors. And, you know, you come by and I can show you some plans that we're working on how we would, you know, create more efficiencies for us to service the public. And so I can kind of walk you through that. If you want to come in, I can show you some plans on
Okay.
that. The other item, you know, that's in the internal service funds is tablets, you know, for the city council if we want to go that route, to go more electronic and get rid of the, you know, the paper and make it more efficient for the city clerk and distributing documents. You guys sit on a lot of boards and commissions, and, you know, a lot of people are going, you know, to the electronic format, and we can do that.
Robin's killed a few trees this year.
Yeah, it's sustainable. You know, it's good for the good for the environment, and you know, I'll work with the council on, you know, how to implement that. But we want to make sure that we keep up with that technology too, and, you know, get a little bit more efficient in how we do things. The other staffing highlight that, you know, we didn't talk about is in the Public Works Department. Later on in tonight's agenda, we have a contract to get some engineering services to assist us with doing, you know, implementing some of these projects that we've outlined, like the Second Street Sewer Project is, I guess, one of our major priorities that we need to get done, that we have some deadlines, we need some assistance. We've talked about, in next year's budget, you know, hiring more of a permanent, you know, staff member, project manager. This will help us. We funded, you know, a contract position. Next year, the plan is to fund, you know, more of a full-time position to assist in this project management. So it's kind of a phase approach to get immediate assistance in making that happen. So that's in this budget as well. And I think that fund is, a lot of it, you know, or some of it's from sewer, water, and then also probably a little bit from the general fund is how that's divided up.
Yeah, based on the projects that we had going, we used an estimate of that.
And I think that hits all the highlights that we wanted to discuss.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Welcome.
Does
Any other
Council have
questions?
any, Council have any further questions?
No, we'll have just one comment, and I know we're going to talk later
Yes.
before we pass this, but I think one of the discussions that we need to have, and I think certainly it's appropriate to have it in here as it sits, but in the future, we really need to consider some kind of a change to how we're operating the cultural center. I just have a real difficult time with running a deficit of $44,000 and not really getting much for it. I mean, we know we have a deficit in the pool, but we know what the pool's providing. But we have a large space, and it's costing us a significant amount of money, and I just think there must be a better way.
And we'll be talking about that in just a few months when we go talking about our budgeting.
I think Mr. Hawley just volunteered to create a committee.
Fabulous.
And if you check the archives, this discussion has occurred before.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll open it up for public comment.
If you would have read your agenda. No.
I'll open it for public comment. Come on up. On the mid-year budget.
I would like to thank our finance director for an excellent presentation today. But I have some questions of some of the ways that our mid-year budget, when it gets to the budget we're going to do in May or June, we need to consider something. Councils in the past considered the cities that it was prudent for the city to create some reserves. Unfortunately, for a number of years, some people on this council really didn't consider that. So I have some concerns One thing is our cultural center. I believe if the city would think about sending out solicitations for private citizens to rent the art gallery, I believe some extra money could be coming into the city. That space currently is underused. Also, unlike Richard and Nia, I want to bring up our police department. One of the favorite things some of these members of this council likes to do is give money to the Chamber of Commerce and the Tourist Bureau. Well, if the TOT taxes are down, are they really doing the job that they say they're doing? And isn't it more important that my city is safe for the tourists that come? My argument, if the TOT taxes are down, let's place some of the blame on the Chamber of Commerce and the Tourist Bureau. And that we need to fund our police department. I will keep preaching this forever. Also, I have another concern. I'd like to suggest we have two excellent mechanics that work for the city, Mark and his assistant. I would hope that Eric Weir would have them look at the current fleet of vehicles from the Public Works Department, the Police Department, and the Fire Department. I still would like to suggest, Pal.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Bill Lonsdale and I live in Crescent City. I'd like to applaud Councilmember Shalong and Councilmember Holly for their close questioning of staff on this mid-year budget. I would also respectfully suggest to your council that because of the number of things that cannot be answered at this point and the things we're going to study, that the budget is not really ready for you to adopt. And one of the things that excites me most, and I don't mean that in a positive way, is that I sat here, as many of people in this room did, through meeting after meeting leading up to the construction of the sewer plant. And engineer after engineer, administrator after administrator assured your predecessor council that everything was under control. Everything is in hand. We've studied everything. There are going to be no surprises. And this is what it's going to cost. And based on that, your council laid out a rate structure for the people who live in the city and the county who use the sewer and water service. Now, none of those projections have come true. Some people will argue, as the wrath comes down on your council when you are led inexorably to a draconian rate increase, will argue that you were led down the primrose path again, because the costs all along for the last 7 or 8 years have been lowballed by the people who are pushing the sewer plant. So I urge you to be very careful about how you do this. And one way you can do this now is wait until some of these rate model studies are done before you adopt the mid-year budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. Is there any further comments on the mid-year budget update?
I think that it was a very well prepared and very thorough. This is probably the best adjustments in where we are at mid-year that I've seen since I've been on the council. And I appreciate not only the good news, but the painful news, which gives us a better feel for how we need to move forward, and I think it was a really good job. We know that we need to set some policies in place that will make things more efficient and not have us be hit by surprises. If you look at the budget, I mean, we had, before we really hadn't had a specific detail for a 5-year budget projection that we've had in years past, and we also hadn't had a 10-year projection in our general fund equipment and replacement schedule, nor have we had any healthy discussions on capital improvements and the need to upgrade certain of our facilities so that they're ADA compliant and safe for our staff. So I appreciate all the work that was done. Budgets are a work in progress. It's not anything that you have to take set in stone. If there's something new that comes to staff's attention, I trust that they will be bringing it to us post haste, especially when it's good news, but also when it's bad news. So I'm appreciative of all the work and all the information. We have a detailed plan for capital improvements going to the year 2018, for example. So I'm quite impressed with it and appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Well, we can have a 50-year capital improvement plan, but if we don't have the money to fund it, it looks pretty on the shelf. So we all know how hard our staff works, and this is, all good information, but, we need to do a better job, and we need to sharpen our pencils in a couple of our funds. I'm looking forward to those rate studies. And, I agree with Mr. Lonsdale, but at the same time, we need to adopt this mid-year budget review so that we can redirect some of the expenses and be able to expend some of the revenues that are coming in a different way than what we approved earlier in the year. I'd like to see a timeline. Do we have a timeline on the rate studies?
I do not have a specific timeline, but I'll get something for the council next couple weeks.
That'd be great. Okay.
Any other public comment? Mr. Hall, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a couple of quick comments. This was a lot of work, and I appreciated all the detail we were provided, both in this and then the information from the last 6 months, and we were able to compare back and forth, and that was a good process, and I thank you for that. A couple of things. I know it's awkward for the public when they hear that we're talking about technology and tablets at a time when we're talking about deficits, but the school district went to a more technology-based agenda online, and we determined that it saved over $20,000 a year. So I really don't think this will be an additional expenditure when you consider the staff time and the paper and the copying and all of those kinds of things. It's a very reasonable thing to do, and it's something that almost all boards at municipal boards anyway have gone to. The staffing changes, I agree with those. I think that we're going to do good things. I think some of those staffing changes are associated with really tackling blight and abating some properties, and along with that, the $50,000 toward that effort is an exciting new effort that I think will benefit us in the long run. Hopefully, if we get some of the blight taken care of, we'll have businesses moving in, and we'll realize some long-term benefits from that expenditure. And I appreciate the thought process that went into doing those things. So I agree with Ms. Shalong. There's enough good in this mid-year adjustment that I think we need to go forward with it. I appreciate Mr. Lonsdale's comments that maybe we wait, but I think that we'll be dealing with the next year's budget, the 13-14 budget, in the very near future, and we'll hopefully be dealing with more facts and figures at that time. So I'm ready to vote.
Thank you. Mr. Gastineau, do you have any comments? No comments. And for me, I concur with the council. The budget does not surprise me. Following the water and sewer, 12 years since a rate increase, and it's $9 a month, doesn't shock anybody. The sewer rates, you know, the state, when they had us build that plant to that capacity, I knew that we are never going to see that, all the growth coming to this county. You have to do what you're ordered to do. And our rates, we set low, and then we didn't even do a rate increase when we were supposed to do that rate increase. That apartment complex, I hope it comes to happen. I'm assuming it's going to happen, and that'll reduce that deficit in half, but we still have a deficit. And we still have to run our utilities for the city and for part of the county. That's our job to do that. And no one likes to see increases, but I read in newspapers every single day in California how they're dealing with water and sewer problems now. And I just am so thankful that we did it when we did, because the costs now are astronomical. I just read about Cloverdale that has to raise their sewer rates to $90 a month because they didn't work on their plant. Now they're at the point where we are, where the state is ordering it, $90 a month, because they didn't do it. So I'm glad we acted. Sometimes we have no control of what we have to do, because we're mandated by the state. And those people that live in Del Norte County and Crescent City, we all know what mandates are. You know, that's part of living here. But anyway, this is an excellent mid-year. This is a mid-year budget. It tells us it's a snapshot where we are in the middle of the year. Some of it is good, some of it isn't so good, but you just take it as it goes and you try to do the best you can with it, and you try to make improvements if you can, and move on to our budget. And it'll be a month or two, and we'll be starting our new budget for next year, having hearings about that. So I'm open for a motion to approve and adopt our mid-year budget.
I'll make a motion to approve the mid-year budget as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Shalong?
Yes.
Councilmember Gastineau?
Yes.
Councilmember Murray?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Holly?
Yes.
And Mayor Enia.
Yes, thank you. Item number 6A is to consider waiving the full reading and read by title only and adopt an ordinance. It's number 771, an ordinance of the City of Crescent City adding Chapter 8.24 entitled Cost Recovery for Emergency Response Services to Title 8 of the Health and Safety Code of the City of Crescent City Municipal Code. And this was brought back to us after we made changes to it. And this is the cost recovery and collection fees. Mr. Palazzo? Or, yeah,
Actually, I'm
Mr.
going
Rice.
to have
That's right.
Attorney Rice present this.
Who are you?
Okay, just as a recap, yes, this was introduced December 3rd meeting. Council directed that we bring it back for another meeting so that we have more time for public input and public comment. That's brought back on January 22nd. At that time, the council directed that we remove the authorization for cost recovery related to structure fires and motor vehicle collisions. On page 2 of the staff report, there is a revision of the ordinance. So for everybody's information, the fees for fire response to structure fires and the fees for response to motor vehicle accidents have been removed.
Before I open that up for public comment?
I just had one thing. I'm sorry. I just had one thing. I think that I'm the one that made the motion, but we kind of went back and forth so many times on this. And I thought that I had included, and Robin can probably correct me if I'm wrong, the robbery panic. I thought that I had stated that it too should have a warning the first time. So I don't know how the council feels about that, or if you remember the discussion. It just didn't make it into this final document.
We can deal with that when we get to the resolution, and we can fix that then.
Yeah.
So let's
Okay.
fix that when we talk about the resolution.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, I'll open it up now to public comment. Yes.
I'd like to make a suggestion to this council. I think I misspoke at the last time this was brought up. Because I've been witnessing something, and I think the city should be reimbursed for something, either through people's insurance, or we need to demand that our wonderful ambulance companies start doing a better job. In the last 2 weeks, I've been watching Officer Reno make medical emergency calls. Today, at Mental Health, Officer Reno responded to a medical call. Well, he got there first before our wonderful ambulance company got there. So as a certified medical technician, Officer Reno provided a service. So here comes our ambulance company. They put this person on the ambulance, and they finally transported him or her. I didn't really get to notice the sex of this person, to the hospital. My contention is Ron Sandler and our wonderful Del Norte Ambulance Company isn't doing the job that the county charters them to do. I'm sorry, because more and more responsibility is being put on our fire department. The city should be able to recover some of the cost.
Thank you.
Because we have a mutual agreement with the ambulance company. I believe the city's living up to that, but our ambulance company is dropping the ball.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on alarm fees, which is the subject of this? If there are no further comments, we'll bring it back to the council for comments, if any more. If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Oh, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I was, we talked this with Mr. Palazzo earlier today about our utilities. Say if somebody like digs through a water line, our guys have to be out there. So there's, in here, there's no cost recovery from the department, the Public Works Department. It specifically says the fire department and the police department can get cost recoveries, but
Well, it's under the, and I brought that up at the last meeting, the utility emergency standby rate.
But that's basically for the, if there was an electrical line down, or if there was a gas leak, then the fire department and the police department would be there on scene.
So you're talking about what kind of?
Water, if we had a water line emergency.
You know, I would think that.
So would that be emergency inspection,
I would consider that an emergency.
Under utility emergency standby.
Yeah, I would think it'd be other too, a utility emergency standby. Utility could be the water department, sewer department. It is an emergency. I don't have a problem with that in there.
Yeah, and I didn't have an opportunity to do some follow-up with that one. You may be, thinking like if a fire hydrant gets hit and we have to have our, not only emergency response typically, fire might respond to that, for, protection of the area, but then our utility, needs to respond to turn off the water and fix the damage. There may be something already in place, for that, and, I'll have to do some more research with that one. We can always come back and amend the ordinance if that's
a good point.
That's a good point.
Do you have anything else, Mr. Kessler? No? Any other comment?
Just that staff came back with exactly what I was hoping for. That we're addressing those things that I think we're all in agreement with, and I look forward to passing this. So,
If that is there a motion for approval?
I just have one comment.
Sure. go ahead.
I'm not overly in favor of this for a number of reasons, for people that don't have the ability to pay. So what I'd like to do is make a suggestion that if this does pass, that we have revenue generated report in a year to show us how valuable this really is.
We can do that, absolutely. You know, part of this is, you know, not intended to generate revenue. A lot of it's for the education, especially for the fire and burglar alarms, to, you know, kind of change the habits of the businesses, to educate their employees to be mindful of where the buttons are at, you know, and that'll help reduce our police services and our calls of service, you know, to these certain locations. You know, part of the, and I guess what we'll track is, or measure, which is a really good point that Councilmember Murray brought up, not only the revenue, but maybe the number of calls.
Increased calls, yes.
Increased calls, and see if we're, you know, the idea is to get a lower number of calls.
Yeah, we want the number of calls to go down.
We want the number of calls to go down, so that, I think, we'll measure both. We'll measure not only revenue, but we'll measure the number, you know, the response of that.
Okay. Is there a motion for approval of this?
Yes, I'd move to approve ordinance number 771, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Crescent City, by adding Chapter 8.24 entitled Cost Recovery for Emergency Response Services, to Title 8, Health and Safety of the Crescent City Municipal Code.
I will second.
It's been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Murray?
Yes.
Councilmember Shalong?
Yes.
Councilmember Gastineau?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Holly?
Yes?
And Mayor Enya.
Yes, thank you. We'll go to 6B, which is the companion measure. This is the resolution, and this is also continue the public hearing and waive full reading and title only, adopt the companion measure. It's the same ordinance chapter, it's ordinance 771, adding chapter 8.24 entitled Cost Recovery for Emergency Response Services to Title 8 of the Health and Safety of the Crescent City Municipal Code, and we want to take out under robbery, false alarm robbery, the first time is a waiver of fees. There is no fee.
Warning.
Warning, rather.
Yes.
Instead of the $75, a warning.
I believe the direction was to have first alarm warning, second alarm 75, third alarm 125, and
Right.
fourth alarm and more at 200. Is
Right.
that correct?
Okay, that's the correction. Does council
Yes.
have any other technical comments? Any public comment on the resolution of this? Yes.
Mr. Nia, you made a statement at the last time these fees were brought up that the state, in its code, could collect $1,000. I'd like to suggest that as we go through these call services thing, that instead of using the $200 fee, the city should use the state code of $1,000. If you really want to put some teeth to this, $200 doesn't do it.
Thank you. Any other public comment? No other public comment. I'll bring it back to the board.
I move to approve resolution number 2013-02, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Crescent City establishing the user fee for the provision of certain emergency response services pursuant to ordinance number 771, with one change of creating the first false alarm under robbery panic to a warning, second false alarm $75, third false alarm $125, and fourth false alarm an additional at $200.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, would you pull the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Shalong?
Yes.
Councilmember Gastineau?
Yes.
Councilmember Murray?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Holly?
Yes.
And Mayor Enia?
Yes, thank you. We'll move on to number 7, and something that I didn't do during the appointments of committees, and that's to appoint an alternate to the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority, and that's for that 4 or 5 member board, and I'll appoint Councilmember Shalong to that as an alternate to that board. Number 8, under new business, authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Mr. Michael Young for project management services. Mr. Palazzo?
Yeah, I'll be very brief with this staff report. This implements actually our newly adopted mid-year budget. We've several projects that we have some deadlines to meet those projects. We need some engineering or project management services for those projects. We've had some shifts in our Public Works Department recently. Mr. Ware's now the Public Works Director. It's kind of filling a slot that he vacated. We have some talent within our city that could help us out on a temporary basis to get us through this time until we can hire more permanent staff. And so what staff is doing is recommending entering a contract with Mr. Young for project management services. And this will be a contract that'll go through probably November of 2013.
Any comments from the council? Yes.
So, a couple things. Obviously, the young man we're considering is very capable and talented. So just my 2 concerns were $90 an hour seems high, but Mr. Palazzo assured me that that's a pretty fair hourly rate if you're contracting with an engineer. Number 2 is that I know that, and maybe I don't know, I'm assuming that Mr. Young has been involved in some other projects here locally, and I would just ask that those projects would be disclosed so there were no conflicts of interest and or any interests that he has within the city are disclosed as well that may be affected by water and sewer projects that he's working on for the city.
Would he fill out a 700 form?
It's a contract for services, so I don't believe a 700 form would be filled under a contract. I did talk to Mr. Ware, and maybe Mr. Ware can address that item that you just brought up
Sure.
on the projects that Mr. Young may be working on.
Okay. Any other comments from council? Well, Mr. Ware's going to come up.
Just very quick.
Although not included in the contract itself, this was talked about with Mr. Young, and yes, as far as any projects within the city, he will not be working on any outside projects that affect any of the work that he'll be doing for the city itself.
Or you're specifically asking like sewer and water projects possibly that may be outside the city limits, and we'll have Mr. Young disclose anything that he may be working on.
I'm just trying to keep ahead of the any kind of a conflict that may arise in the future.
Sure.
So that we're all, I mean, it's in his best interest as well.
Exactly, and we can definitely do that. So tomorrow I'll have Mike disclose any projects that he might currently have going, and we have discussed this in the past. I don't foresee any conflicts.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Mayor, would you like me to have Mr. Young
Yes, sir.
address
Come
that?
up here. Good evening.
Michael Young, I'm a resident of the city. Section 9 of the contract says disclosure, and I might point out that I was one that originally pointed out that we should include in all of our contracts this disclosure thing. So I'm very sensitive about that whole fact. I've even just recently turned down a simple little job in town that couldn't have even possibly involved in a conflict unless there might have been some issue concerning the building department, and I don't intend to. I just thought of a comment that I've just happened to remember this year that it was 40 years ago this year that I moved to Crescent City, and I have been involved in probably every major public works project in some capacity during that time. And I retired from from the city 9 years ago, although some would say I didn't retire, particularly when I came back for about 8 months as a city manager. But I've looked at retirement as being a time in which I get to do what I enjoy, and on my schedule and my timing. And this is one of these opportunities I'd really like to work at the end of my career, working on another major project for the city. It's a part-time basis. Yeah, I want to be compensated for it, and I am being compensated substantially below what most professional engineers with my experience would do, would charge. I do that because I'm doing it for the city. I committed myself here. I didn't think I would stay here for 40 years, but I have. And I guess I'm going to stay here until they bury me. So at this point. So I look forward to.
Well, I hope that's not anytime soon, Mr.
I hope so
Young.
too. Yeah, I hope so too. So I look forward to working on these projects, and I've always on these projects looked for the best interests of the city. You know, and I know there's been some differences of opinions on occasion of what that was, but I know in my heart that what I've done has always been for the city's interest. So I look forward to working on these, and look forward to working with Eric and the staff. But they look like some exciting projects ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other Councilor Stewart?
I have a quick, relatively easy one. On Exhibit B, it's be the fourth bullet, and it says, terms of payment, services must be limited to 10 hours by phone or internet consultation during March 2013. It just kind of stuck out there as
Must be in Haiti.
No,
is that
no,
what-
it isn't. Actually, I was planning to take a trip to Arizona. We've canceled that for other reasons. So that really is not an issue. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to delete that one, I would be fine with me, because it wouldn't change the total amount of the contract, and it would allow the hours to be spread out even more so through the month of March also. But that was the reason for it, is I had already scheduled a trip, and...
Mrs. Young may not want that to be deleted.
What's that?
Mrs. Young may not want that to be
No,
deleted.
she may not want to delete. She may want to keep me working, but at home.
Okay, thank you.
But that could be taken out if you wanted, because as it turns out, other than probably taking a week or 10 days in March, I expect to be here all the way through until my next trip to Haiti, which is November, and this ends, of course, about that time. Hopefully, everything is done by then. So,
Thank you.
well, I would think it might want to be taken out.
We'll remove that,
Yeah.
from
Okay.
Section B or Exhibit B.
Any other council comment before I open for public? Okay, I'll open it up for public comment. Yes.
Well, this is going to surprise you, Mr. Ania. I want to praise Eric Weir for coming up with an excellent idea. We all know the excellent job Mike has done for the city over the years, and he's more than capable of, as Mr. Weir said, working on some special projects. I would hope the city manager and this council, when they review these special projects that Mr. Young will be working for, the two be added. The first one, I think Mr. Young should be helping the city manager with the downtown improvement concept that has been brought up in the past. I would hope Mr. Young would get input from our bid people. Recently, the city hired the contract grinder, and they're going through the city grinding the sidewalks. So the next time I stumble and damage my knee, that would be lessened. Also, there's another project I think Mr. Young should work on. I think this is important. Every year we give the county a number of hookups. They sell those hookups to residents in the county. I think the city needs to revisit the fee amount for those hookups. Also, I think it's time that the county service area that my city provides, like at the Birch Track, all of that needs to be looked at again, because one of the problems that was admitted tonight is the extra costs of our sewer treatment plant. And as a city resident, I think the county and some of the service districts are getting away with highway robbery.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it up to back up to the council. Is there a motion for approval of the contract?
I move to approve to authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Michael Young for project management services with the deletion of the paragraph mentioned earlier.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Please pull the vote.
Councilmember Gastineau?
Yes.
Councilmember Shalong?
Yes.
Councilmember Murray? Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Holly?
Yes.
And Mayor Enya?
Yes. Okay. That concludes new business. We'll go to city council items now. Legislative matters, and that, are there any legislative matters?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. City manager report and council directives. City manager, do you have anything to report?
Yeah, unless would like Mr. McDonald to give an update on the oversight board.
On what?
At this point, no. The oversight board information.
You want to give one?
Would you like Mr. McDonald to give an update on the oversight board?
Sure.
What we're doing on that?
Sure.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks. I kind of wanted to give you some changes that just in the last couple weeks. They've come up with a new ROPS form, which is Recognized Obligation Payment Schedules. That next one that is supposed to be submitted is due to be submitted to the Department of Finance, the Auditor Controller, and the State Controller by March 1st. The problem is that the Oversight Board meets on the 13th, and the next successor agency board meeting for the council, I believe, is February 19th. So technically or typically you would have the successor agency approve the ROPS first and then bring it to the Oversight Board. I checked with our advisor if we could do the Oversight Board before the successor agency. He said in order to meet the short time frame there shouldn't be a problem, but if the council didn't want to do that and they want to see it first, we may have to try and schedule a special meeting to approve this ROPS, or just have staff prepare it, have the Oversight Board do it, and then council approve it as the successor agency after.
I think a lot of this is kind of a heads up to the council. There's not really going to be any real significant changes to this ROPS that you haven't seen.
Right, it's just figuring out a new form.
It's new form.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that.
And its process. Again, it's something that, we're dealing with the Department of Finance and getting this information, at the end or at a very late date, and then dealing with timing issues. And we just want to make sure that the city council is up to date on what our issues are and our timing, with dealing, with these systems.
Councilmember Murray?
Did you say March 13th?
March 1st is when we need to submit it.
Oh, March 1st, okay.
So it's kind of going to be backwards, but it'll allow us to still make the deadlines. I don't expect the successor agency or the Oversight Board is going to change it much, but that way we'll be able to make the Department of Finance deadlines, and our real goal and hope and expectation is that they'll give us these notice of completion that we're waiting for. And we've really been on track for everything else. They're doing their review of the due diligence reviews, the two that we did before, so we're getting ahead, and I'm getting them the information back. So if I had to bet, I would bet that they'll approve ours relatively quick, because it's pretty simple. But
And you'll give this to the Oversight Committee on Wednesday, the 13th?
yeah.
Okay, good.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You okay with that? All right. Go ahead.
I just want to point out a couple things. One is I appreciate the water, the maintenance department's efforts. We lost our water the other day, and they had a full court press. I mean, there were people all over, and we got that back within an hour and a half, something like that. And I have been associated with a rural system, and it takes days, so I appreciate that a lot.
Mr. Ania would like to report that he is very happy to hear you went and paid your bill.
Yeah, they shut it off. The neighbors didn't like it. So are we giving reports on what we attended?
We
We
are.
had a LAFCO committee, or LAFCO meeting. I was elected the chair of LAFCO. I'm excited about that. We dealt with mid-year budgets, commission policy, the policy basically how LAFCO operates, and we updated exactly what we're going to do relative to the special district reports. We also had a tri-agency meeting and I was elected chairman of that. And
He was the only one that
we
showed
dealt,
up.
yeah. Be careful what you ask for, huh? In any case, we dealt with some debt settlement issues and talked a little bit about the future of economic development. So that's all I have to report tonight.
Councilmember Roy?
I didn't do too much. I attended the Sutter Coast Hospital Ad Hoc Committee meeting, and it's all closed session. But for the community, I think it's suffice it to say that there are a group of people who want to keep our hospital from becoming regionalized and going to critical access. We want to increase services as opposed to decrease them, so we're still working on that. And I just wanted to mention, I heard on NPR today that today is Rosa Parks' 100th birthday, so that's all I have.
Councilmember Gastineau?
Not much to report. I went out of town, so I missed the Visitors Bureau meeting. And other than that, you guys took me off of the big council for the solid waste media. So you get just a new guy learning his stuff. But thank you.
Councilmember Shalom?
Thanks. There's a lot to learn, Ron. I actually admire the fact that you're just sitting back and taking it all in and listening. It's hard to do. I was actually hoping with Mr. Chief Wakefield here that we could hear about the fire from over the weekend, and I saw pictures from our talented city photographer, but just wanted to make sure there weren't anyone hurt or...
Well, first of all, I think that ordinance, you need another provision that there is a fee if it's on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah. Exactly.
You have that, Martha?
And being that it was on Super Bowl Sunday, I mean, I was going into it, I had no idea what I was going to get. And as you know, with the volunteers, you just never know. Yeah. Well, we had, I think it was 34 volunteers from the city and the district there, plus we had Fort Dick Fire and Pelican Bay Fire. So our response was tremendous. That's a good group of people. We had plenty of people to do what we needed to do. When we got on scene, we had heavy fire in a garage, in the garage in the back end of that yellow house. Probably most of you drove by there today or yesterday, but and the fire had extended to the garage of the neighbor. So we kind of had quite a conflagration, and then there was a car parked in the driveway that was also burning. And we took the first line, we took a heavy line in and knocked a lot of that fire out of the front of it, and I think that's what pretty much stopped the spread to the neighbor's garage. There's very little damage to that structure. A little bit of repair work in the garage and the roof, and that house will be whole again. The other house, the fire came through the kitchen and then moved, which was in the back, and then it moved forward through the rest of the house, or most of the rest of the house, not all of it. We had quite a bit of damage to the structure. We had some really soft roofs. There were times when we couldn't get on the roofs because they were too dangerous, but we were able to eventually extinguish the rest of the fire. We had the state fire investigator here today, just preliminary. Are you listening to this? Are you getting the facts right? Okay. Preliminary, he's looking at it as an electrical fire. That house is probably 100 years old, old electric work in it. You know, it was just a few years ago the person that lived there forever passed away, quite elderly, so it probably hadn't been updated much. And anyway, it worked out well. We had good response from the PD. We had our first activation of our new CERT fire team. There's 3 of those members that showed up and assisted on scene. And they did take one of the children to the hospital to be checked for smoke inhalation, but I think she's probably fine.
Good.
That's about it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have what? You may continue.
So I attended the Wild Rivers Market grand opening.
Thank you.
And it was a great event. There must have been, I was there for about an hour and a half, and I'm going to guess a couple hundred people came and went during that time, and so it was a really fun event. And I attended a chamber board meeting we're having, the Chamber's having their board retreat in early March, and I told them that I would bring back to the council, I feel like my back's always to you, Ron, that the board is considering creating one position between the Chamber and the Visitors Bureau, an executive director that would handle the duties of the Visitors Center, Chamber of Commerce, and the Visitors Bureau. And so just something for us to consider in the future as we look at funding, you know, of being able to direct all of our funds to one location, if that actually comes to fruition. So I just wanted to kind of put that seed in your head. And they are continuing to use Jeff Palmer's interim services for the Visitors Bureau, but also to do some interim chamber work while they're going through the recruitment process. And I understand RHS has hired a new executive director, and I was just going to ask Mr. Ania, since he sits on the board, if there was going to be any kind of an introduction to the community, or?
Oh, yes. We planned several.
Okay, good, great. And I think that's it for me tonight.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I attended the Sutter Coast Physicians Chamber Mixer, I think it was last week, and there was a lot of people at that one. Social host ordinance, that's also the party ordinance. We had another meeting, and I think everything was finalized there. Chief Plack attended that also with me. I'm sorry I missed the Wild River Market opening there. I was ill. I didn't have any other meetings last week, but coming up this week, Thursday, I just wanted to tell you I'm going to be meeting the city manager and I, and Supervisor Gitlin, and Mr. McNamara from Search and Rescue, Terry McNamara, and hopefully the fire chief and the police chief. We're going to be meeting with a brigadier commander. I'm not sure if that's his exact title, from the Army Corps of Engineers, is coming up from San Francisco, and we're going to discuss the problems that we have continually at the jetty and how to try to resolve some of those problems. And he's coming up here, and he's also going to meet with the harbor to talk with the harbor people about issues relating to the harbor. So it's pretty nice that he's coming all the way up from San Francisco to take a personal look at our problem, and also to stop by the harbor. So that's going to happen this Thursday, and I'll report out to you when at the next meeting on what happened with that. So if there's no other business, we will adjourn until the next meeting, which is going to be a Tuesday night, February 19th at 6 p.m. here at the Flint Administration Center. Thank you for coming tonight.
And a plug for that meeting will be our joint meeting with our Beachfront Park Master Plan presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, that meeting also will be our planning commissioners will be there for the...
Can we do a public service announcement about that meeting so the public is aware of that our beachfront master plan is going to be presented?
I believe that's that's happening.
Okay, good.